Okay, what if you could read something once and actually, remember it? Today, we're breaking down a proven research-backed method that's designed to do exactly that. It's called SQ3R, and honestly, it might just change the way you study forever.
Let's start with a feeling I'm pretty sure we've all had. You know the one. You get to the bottom of a page, your eyes have scanned every single word, and then nothing. You have absolutely no idea what you just read. It's so frustrating, right? It feels like such a waste of time, and it's an incredibly common problem.
So what's actually going on here when that happens? Well, it turns out it's not about you being a bad reader or anything like that. It's all about using the wrong approach. See, the real issue comes down to the difference between passive reading and active reading.
So when we read, our brains can kind of go into two different modes. First, there's passive reading. That's when you're just letting your eyes drift over the words without really engaging. And then there's active reading, which is intentional, it's purposeful, and it's all about actually connecting with the material. And yeah, that passive approach, that's the root cause of why we forget.
There's actually a name for this. It's called pseudo-studying. And it's basically the illusion of being productive, right? You're putting in the hours, you're staring at the book, but you're not actually processing a thing. You're just reading lazily. It is the absolute opposite of studying smart.
Okay, so how do we fix this? How do we switch from that passive pseudo-studying mode into being an active, engaged learner? Well, the answer is a really structured system developed way back in the 1940s by an educational psychologist named Francis Robinson, and it's called SQ3R. Now, SQ3R, it's an acronym for these 5 simple steps: survey, question, read, recite, and review. And look, this isn't just some random list to memorize, it's a roadmap. It's a system that turns that passive reading into a really active learning experience. So let's break down how each of these steps actually works.
All right, the first 2 steps, survey and question, are all about preparation. This is where you set the stage for real learning before you even read the first full sentence. Think of it as getting your brain warmed up and ready for what's about to come.
Okay, step 1 is survey. Now, before you dive in and read a single word in detail, your goal here is to get a bird's eye view. It's kind of like looking at a map of the terrain before you start a long hike, right? You're just trying to get the lay of the land.
So what does that actually look like? Well, you're scanning for the big signposts. You're looking at titles and headings. Those give you the structure. You're reading the intro and the summary to get the main argument. You're noticing any bold text or diagrams. Those are huge clues that the author thinks something is important. This simple act primes your brain. It starts building a mental framework so it knows where to file all the details when you actually start reading.
Okay, so now you've got the map. But a map's no good without a destination. And that brings us to step 2. Question. Honestly, this might be the most important step of the whole process because it gives your reading a clear purpose. You're not just a passive reader anymore. You're an active detective looking for clues.
And it's surprisingly simple to do. Let's say a heading is, "The War of 1812 begins." That becomes a question in your head. Okay, who was involved in this, and why did it start? Or if the heading is, "The gas laws," your question is just, what are the gas laws? See? By doing this, you've just flipped a switch in your brain to start actively searching for answers, and that is the absolute foundation of engaged learning.
All right, you've done your prep work. You have your map, you have your mission. Now it's time to actually engage with the text using the next 2 steps, read and recite.
Step 3 is read. But here's the thing. Now, your reading is completely different. It's focused. You are actively hunting for the answers to the questions you just created. You're reading section by section with a real goal in mind, and that keeps you on track and prevents your mind from just wandering off.
And then comes the step that really truly cements the learning. Recite. After you finish a section, and I don't mean the whole chapter, just the section, you stop. You physically look away from the text and you try to answer your question from memory, in your own words. Ask yourself, could I explain these main ideas to someone else right now?
Now, this isn't just some clever little trick. There is real cognitive science at play here. This whole process of summarizing from memory, it's called active recall. And instead of passively trying to shove information into your brain, you are actively pulling it out, which is just so much more powerful for building memory.
So why does this matter so much? Because that act of reciting, of forcing your brain to retrieve the information, is what signals to your brain that this stuff is important. This is literally the process that moves knowledge from your fragile short-term memory into your much more durable long-term memory. Okay, We are on the home stretch now. We've prepared, we've engaged. Now it's time for the final step that ties it all together, and then we'll look at the massive payoff you get for using this method.
The final step, number 5, is review. So once you finish the entire chapter or the article, you just go back over your questions one last time. Can you still answer them from memory? This final pass really solidifies the information, it helps you see the big picture, and it interrupts that natural process of forgetting that happens over time.
But, does all this extra effort actually pay off? Well, the research says yes. Overwhelmingly. Studies have shown that using the SQ3R method can increase your reading comprehension and retention by up to 60%. Think about that. That's not a small boost. That is a massive leap in how efficiently you can learn.
And the benefits, they go way beyond just getting better grades. You will actually save time because you won't have to reread things over and over again. You'll build way stronger long-term memory, which means you can finally ditch those last-minute cram sessions. You'll start to grasp complex topics much faster. And, maybe most importantly, you'll build the lifelong habit of critical, active thinking.
And the best part is, with just a little practice, this whole thing stops feeling like some rigid 5-step process. It just becomes your automatic, natural way of approaching any text. So the question isn't really if this works. It does. The real question is, what are you going to do with all the extra time and brain power you're about to unlock?